I love Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. When it's at its best, you're challenged and have a lot of fun, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone looking for a newer Yu-Gi-Oh! Format to play, or anyone that's a fan of the anime. However, I also hate Duel Links. It's a broken, buggy mess with no real payoff for competitive play, and if you think the prize support in the TCG is bad, you'll get a kick out of the nothing that Duel Links players are rewarded for their time, energy, and money. These two points of views are opposing, obviously, and I know this, but they're both true from my perspective, and in today's video, I'm going to critique Duel Links as much as I can, and I'm not going to hold back on the good or the bad parts. It is technically true that I've made a few of these videos already, but what those videos lacked is what many YouTuber TCG videos lack when talking about Duel Links, specifically that I had not played the game very much when I made those past videos. Sure, it is true that I did play it casually for a few weeks, but I hadn't really sat down and played all that it had to offer. For this video, which I've spent a lot of time on, I decided to play in 3 full seasons as well as stage 1 of the KC Cup that fell at the end of that 3rd season. In all 3 seasons, I hit King of Games, which is the maximum rank you can achieve, and in KC Cup stage 1, I made it to dual level max, not because I had to qualify for stage 2, but because I wanted to see what the experience was like. While I did technically play in stage 2 of the KC Cup, I was honestly so burned out by that point that I only played it casually just for like 5 hours or so throughout the whole weekend. Before I played stage 1 at all, and before I got to King of Game for the 3rd time, I honestly wanted to try and rank up as high as possible in stage 2, but by the time that Friday rolled around at like 1 in the morning, I was so sick of Duel Links, I couldn't bring myself to play anymore. I would like to acknowledge that I'm aware that I didn't play in any tournaments, such as the ones found on Duel Links Meta's channel, and there's going to be at least one person that says I didn't play competitively enough because I didn't enter any of those tournaments. There are 2 reasons why I feel that this isn't a good point to make from someone that's commenting. First, Konami did not design the game to have outside tournaments, therefore 99% of the player base will not even realize those tournaments exist at all. While it is true that Duel Links Meta is a pretty big channel, I think if we looked at the entire player base of Duel Links, the vast majority wouldn't even know that those tournaments exist, and we can even see that Konami didn't plan for outside tournaments to happen because the tournament structure is a mess. Second, because of the 2-deck format that many of those tournaments are played in, especially the Duel Links Meta, which is the one that I was most interested in, it'd be impossible for me to reliably enter them because I pretty much only played with the same deck for these 3 months. Obviously, I'm mentioning this now, and I'll get a couple comments from people saying maybe you hated Duel Links because you only played one deck. However, in the relation to the TCG, playing one deck for 3 months isn't that long, and I don't actually feel that affected my bias at all. I think outside tournaments are important for a game like Duel Links, especially because Duel Links has horrible internal prize support, but it's difficult using unofficial means as a way to gauge skill or as a way to gauge how competitive Duel Links is as a game. Generally speaking, I think Duel Links does a lot right, and I know that's not going to sound true because I'm going to spend a lot of this video talking about why I don't like Duel Links, but I do think Duel Links does some things right, especially when it's working. So I do think that one of the best things about Duel Links, and one of the things that got me hooked on the game in the first place, is that it gives cards that are irrelevant in the TCG a chance to shine. Pretty much every single meta deck in Duel Links was completely unplayable on a competitive level in the TCG, so I do think even if those decks are annoying to play against in Duel Links because of the format differences, I do think it's cool that Konami gives these decks sort of a second chance. Decks like Amazonas and For Hire and Vampires, strategies that didn't really see any success in the TCG. I also think that, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, but I think skills are a unique change to the game that keeps things exciting, but I do want to add the caveat there that it only keeps things exciting when the skills are balanced, which I feel that they actually aren't in the grand scheme of things. I'd also like to mention that while Duel Links doesn't really have an old school TCG feel that I think a lot of people were expecting from it, it does definitely have an anime feel, especially if you play the computers in the game. You definitely can play as a variety of anime characters against a variety of anime characters. So if you're a fan of that show, I definitely highly recommend playing Duel Links. And I do want to mention, and I mentioned this in both of my Duel Links analysis videos when I was really enjoying the game, that the dueling on Duel Links is smoother than Dueling Book or Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro or Dev Pro or Dueling Nexus, and is likely the smoothest a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game actually can possibly be. Even the old Yu-Gi-Oh! Online that Konami made was not as smooth as Duel Links, and I give huge shout outs to Konami for making a very polished dueling experience. I think one of the reasons that it's so hard to stream Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro and stream Dueling Book is that it's not fun to play and it's not fun to watch, and I made an entire video on that if you haven't seen that before. But I would want to give huge props to Konami for making Duel Links a very fun game to play from a UI standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint. That's really awesome, and it's not easy to do, so huge props to Konami. And lastly, I do love the music in Duel Links. I definitely was jamming out on a lot of live streams. They give different characters different forms of music, and I think that's really cool and gives you a unique way to actually listen to stuff compared to a game like Hearthstone that I play a lot, where the song is pretty much always just the same thing on repeat. I think it does give the characters that are played sort of a unique flair that many other games don't actually do. If everything I said about Duel Links so far has gotten you interested in playing the game on a casual level, I highly recommend you just go do that and don't watch the rest of this video, because I'm pretty sure after breaking down all of the problems with this game, you'll be unable to actually not notice them, which is a pretty big deal, because one of the things that I noticed in my live streams as I was talking about this, as I was writing the script for this video, is that a lot of people didn't know these things were happening until they were pointed out, and then it kind of ruined parts of the experience. However, it is important to note that there are a lot of issues, some of them game breaking, but many of them only became clear to me after I played hundreds of games in the 2 weeks from my third King of Games and the first stage of the KC Cup. I really didn't have a ton of negative things to say about Duel Links during the first King of Games run, during the second King of Games run. It was really just the last 2 weeks that I played where I really started to hate this game. I will say though that this game is meant to be played competitively. It seems like Konami is trying to push the competitive side of it. They're doing events, and you do get rewarded for being higher on the ladder. I do think though, from my experience and from the people I've talked to, I would recommend just playing this game casually. And there are 3 major issues with this and sort of all the little issues in between them, but the 3 major issues is that it feels like this game was made without player versus players in mind, and it was just created with like form rather than function. And what I mean by that is it seems like many of the choices of the skills and the cards added to the game are just in keeping in mind with like the anime and trying to make the game fun for casual players, but they have huge ramifications on competitive play. I also feel that the ranked mode just in a lot of ways is a huge mess that really can't be fixed with just one simple fix, and probably will require multiple updates to fix many of these issues if they even bother doing that at all. And then third, I think that obtaining cards is a challenge at all levels of play. I think obtaining cards is horrible for casual players. I think obtaining cards is horrible for free-to-play players. And I think obtaining cards is horrible for players like me that are willing to whale and sort of spend a lot of money on the game. I think it could be a lot better at all forms of players trying to get cards in this game. So for the rest of this video, we're going to break down those 3 points because I have a lot to say about each of them. So let's start off talking about why I think that Konami did not design this game with the player versus player experience in mind. First off, the life points being at 4,000 causes a ton of issues. Like, degenerate strategies have a much easier time in this game, from equipped burn to massive morph cheese to even lava golem and Amazoness swordswoman just killing you outright. That is a huge issue, but also decks that shouldn't be good, like OTK decks, have a chance to be good as long as they can consistently manage to get that OTK. I'm thinking of Sylvans, Destiny Heroes, Fur Hires, UA, all the Duel Links players players watching this might say, well, of course those decks are good, but one of the reasons that those decks shouldn't be good in Duel Links and weren't that good in the TCG, I mean, Sylvan's were, but they were completely different strategies, so it's not really worth comparing. The reason that those decks aren't that popular in the TCG is because of the 8,000 life points. And I know some people are going to say, but Doug, you just want Duel Links to be the TCG. That's not true. I'm just saying that these decks would not be good if they had more life points in Duel Links. The problem is, and what a lot of people have pointed out during my live streams, is that the one time they tested life points being at 5,000, it did solve many of the OTK issues. However, there are a variety of other degenerate strategies that aren't OTKs that suddenly become a lot easier to use when you have 5,000 life points versus 4,000 life points, so you really can't fix it. I don't know if the solution is to ban all the degenerate cards. There are a lot of them, and obviously they've taken steps to do that. They hit all the equip burn stuff, they hit massive morph, but I think just in general, they're adding burn cards to this game with only 4,000 life points. It seems like a really bad idea in relation to longevity for people that are going to play this game a year from now. If there's so many burn cards, burn is going to be the only deck that anyone wants to play. But besides burn, let me talk about why those OTK decks work. So when you have 4,000 life points, if you have any Destiny Hero monster with more than 1,200 attack and your opponent doesn't have a monster and you have Mass Change in hand, you can just kill them. You can attack for 1,200 and then you can make Anki and then attack for 2,800 and then your opponent's just dead right there. Even if you had a monster, the Anki can attack over the monster, add a second Mass Change to your hand, and then you can summon a second copy of Anki and actually just kill your opponent there. In Fur Hires, pretty much any Fur Hire monster plus Dampa will just kill your opponent because Dampa will blow up your opponent's only monster, because there's pretty much every deck in Duel Links is normal summon reliant. So Dampa blows up your monster, beats Searches Dyna, that's more than 4,000 damage, you're dead. In the case of UAs, they don't even have the best UA monster, UA Perfect Ace. It's pretty much just an OTK strategy with big monsters. Once again, the only reason that works is because there's only 4,000 life points. I mentioned skills earlier, and I think it's time to talk about them because it fits into this section of Konami not really thinking about players playing against other players on the competitive ladder. So in general, skills are either grossly overused or horribly underpowered. I very rarely found a skill that was fair and that people were using. The ones that are overpowered don't even really feel like they were tested, and if they were tested, they weren't against like actual competitive players. I think of things like Cyberstyle, which I'm really conflicted on. I do want to mention that because of all the skills that I'm going to talk about and complain about, I guess, Cyberstyle is by far the most skill intensive of these abilities. It gives the player that's using it a lot of sort of opportunities to use it or wait on it, and I think that player skill really does show up when they're using Cyberstyle. However, it's way too powerful, and about 50% of your games are going to be against Zane if you jump on ladder right now because of how good the skill is and how many different decks it goes with. I think a badly designed skill that isn't skill intensive is Endless Trap Hell. First off, it's a little surprising that Konami puts Hell into their game. They usually try to not do that kind of stuff, but the name is fitting because if you play against an Endless Trap Hell deck, it'll feel like an Endless Trap Hell. This skill is horribly overpowered, poorly designed, and I have no idea why they put it in the game. And then at the bottom of the barrel of degeneracy, we have Life Cost 0. This is probably the most tilting skill that I've ever faced against. I think the most tilt that I ever got on stream was against Life Cost 0 decks. This is the times when I would play against those types of decks, quit the stream right afterward because I was so salty. Oh my god, it's a Cyberstein deck. No. I hate these decks so much. Just kill me, alright? Just do your combo. Do your combo. I don't even care. Basically, the strategy is if you have less than 1,000 life points, you can activate, you don't have to pay life points for your card effects. For whatever reason, this is not a one-time deal, it's just for the entire turn, which means if you summon Cyberstein, you then can summon 2 Gatling Dragons, blow up your opponent's board, and then summon a Cyber End Dragon and a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, attack your opponent for way more than their life points. Even if they manage to, like if you don't even have Gatling Dragons and you just have 2 Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragons or 2 Cyber End Dragons, like your opponent has to kill both of those cards because there's only 4,000 life points. The decks that play life point and cost 0 is just ridiculous. I have no idea how this is allowed to be in the game. It is just, oh my gosh, it's so frustrating to play against those types of decks. And if you play those types of decks, you're not really learning how to play the game better, because all you're doing is stalling until you can do this stupid OTK. And I do understand those decks are inconsistent, but just because the deck is inconsistent doesn't mean it should be allowed to run amok if it is a pain and a nuisance to play against for most players. And kind of the same thing can be said for card quality, as far as cards either being really overused or horribly underpowered. I know it might not seem like that because it's a Duel Links, and I mentioned that a lot of the cards that are bad in TCG are good in Duel Links, and that is true, but everything scales down because the really good TCG cards aren't in Duel Links. Therefore, there's going to be bad TCG cards that are good in Duel Links, but there are bad TCG cards that are also bad in Duel Links, and there's just this huge gap. Most of the pack that you're going to get is going to be really just trash, basically, and I'll talk about it in a little bit at the end, the last point about getting cards, but there's no way to actually really recycle the bad cards you pull. There are some ways, but they're just a joke, basically, and everyone kind of laughs at them. We'll get to that in a second, but just in general, the card quality and the skills, it seems like there's such a huge gap, and I might even go as far to say as there's a bigger gap in the Duel Links skills and cards as far as good and bad compared to the TCG. I think the TCG actually has a much bigger range of cards that are actually competitively viable, which is pretty interesting and might actually surprise someone that doesn't play Duel Links or doesn't play the TCG. Skills also never really tell you what they're doing. This was like a huge problem when I first started playing Duel Links. I regularly had to Google what each skill does. I have no idea why Konami does not add sort of, like, it would be so simple. It's just like a skill happens, and when you see it happen, you could click on it, see what it actually does. I have no idea why this is not implemented. Maybe they want it to be like the anime where people just make up card effects as they went along, but I found it extremely frustrating to constantly have to look up what skills did. Sure, eventually you figure them out, but some of them I only played against like one time. I have no idea what's happening. I think some of the worst sort of offenders of this not telling your opponent what's happening are the ones where they can see your face down cards. Pegasus has an ability like that. Why it doesn't tell you that, why it doesn't tell you when it starts or stops, I have no idea. It just seems like a huge oversight. And also, because not every character can learn every skill, this game is less of, as far as the competitive ladder goes, it's less of play against your favorite anime characters and more play against the same 4 anime characters 100 million times in a row. Moving on, I mentioned that the ranked mode in Duel Links is a complete and utter mess, and that is absolutely true. I have so many examples of this. I actually have over a page of examples of this written down, so let's get started. First off, and this is a small gripe, and actually it's probably more of a gripe because I've played so much Hearthstone, but it never tells you how many wins you need to rank up until you're one away of either ranking up or ranking down. Now, I know what the Duel Links players are going to say. They're going to say, but Doug, it takes 4 wins in Platinum or 3 losses to rank up and rank down respectively, 5 wins in Legend to rank up or rank down respectively, or I guess 3 losses as well. And I know that you're going to say that, and I understand that's how it works, but do you realize that this is one of the only games that doesn't tell you where you are between, like if I have 1 win or 5 wins, that's fine, because then it tells me if I'm about to rank down or rank up. But if you have 2 wins or 3 wins or 4 wins, or like, I think one of the more frustrating situations is when you win like 2 and then lose 2 and then win 2 and then lose 1, and you have like no idea, you have not been keeping track of it. It doesn't tell you how many losses you're away from ranking down or how many wins you are from ranking up. I have no idea why this is. It seems like such a simple addition, and I think that's kind of like the theme that you see with many of these changes. I'm not asking for that much. That's not really that big a change, but just something like Hearthstone with like little stars to tell you where you are in a particular rank. And furthermore, I will once again sort of compare this to Hearthstone. Actually, just every video game I've ever played. Duel Links has the worst and the most punishing ranking down system that I've ever seen in a video game, and I have no idea why they did this other than to make people waste even more time on ranks that they shouldn't have to. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, in Hearthstone, if you're legend, well, I guess not legend because that's the highest rank in Hearthstone. If you're rank 1, which would be like legend 3 in Duel Links, if you drop down to rank 2, you just have to win a couple more to get back into rank 1, like 2 more. You have to win back the 1 star that you lost, and you have to win 1 more to get back into rank 1. However, in Duel Links, when you go down from like legend 3 to legend 2, you don't have to just win 2 more or 1 more. Even though you were just in Legend 3, you have to completely redo Legend 2 all the way through those 5 wins, then make it to Legend 3, and then win 5 more to get to King of Games. And I don't necessarily think the King of Games challenge thing of winning 5 in a row is that much to ask of players. I think it's kind of cool to have you have to like go undefeated. I think there are some inherent problems, but I don't understand why when you rank down, you're not just ranking down from the rank you're at, you also are basically just restarting the rank before that. It adds so much unnecessary content. It is just insane. I have no idea how this isn't complained about more, especially when you compare it to a variety of other video games as well as card games like Hearthstone. Another gripe that I have with ranked mode, and I don't know if tournaments are ran this way because I haven't looked into it. However, as far as the ladder goes, you have no choice over whether or not you go first or second. And I know a couple people, you might be already typing in the comments, but Doug, you don't really have a choice of that in the TCG. It's up to a die roll. That is true. However, when you lose the die roll, at least in the TCG, you pretty much can assume that your opponent is going to choose to go first. Therefore, in the TCG, plenty of quote-unquote going second strategies have existed. We see going second spirals. We see decks like Mech Knights that only work going second, and you can do that because you know the metagame wants to go first, which basically means anytime you lose the die roll in the TCG, if you're playing one of those decks, you basically always win it because you want to go second anyway. In Duel Links, much like Hearthstone, it's something they both do. Whenever the coin flip happens, it just automatically picks someone to go first and someone to go second. The reason this is an issue is that if you are playing a dedicated going second deck, you literally will just lose every single time that you go first. I think that the biggest example of this, maybe I'm a little salty because I thought this deck was going to be really good. It's not salty, I'm just a little disappointed that Mermails aren't better in Duel Links. But the reason Mermails aren't better in Duel Links and why UAs are better than them is that Mermails have no turn 1 plays. They're really good going second, and you'll probably win a majority of the games you go second. However, anytime you go first, you're basically just passing, therefore you're going to get OTK'd by the decks like For Hires that can either go first or second. I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not meant to be played this way. I think that letting someone pick first or second would add a whole nother dynamic to the game that it really desperately needs. And while I understand that Duel Links uses single games instead of matches to determine winners, I would like to say that this has taught me that Yu-Gi-Oh! Once again is definitely not meant to be played this way at all. I think of so many of the OTK strategies, so many of the degenerate burn strategies, those decks shouldn't be as good, and if there were side decks implemented to this game, I don't even think Worlds was using side decks. It was more like you just had to pick 5 decks and then win with like 3 of them. I believe that's how it worked. But anyway, if there were side decks like those OTK strategies and those degenerate strategies wouldn't be nearly as strong as they are in the game. I think that's something that this game really needs. This Duel Links, more so than anything else that I've ever played, has taught me like not to take certain things for granted, not to take life points for granted, not to take going first and second for granted, and not to take side decks for granted. Those things are all very important to Yu-Gi-Oh! And playing Duel Links so much in the span of a couple months has really made me realize that. I've already made 2 videos addressing the disconnect problem in Duel Links. If you haven't watched them, basically there are at least 3 different disconnecting issues from the game. Whether or not it's Konami's servers, I think a lot of people have said that it's actually not. Konami doesn't do like dedicated servers for Duel Links, and it's just player versus player. One of them just ends up being the host. Whether or not it's Konami's fault that the game got disconnected, I think the way that it's handled is really bad. You can report people that cheat against you and forcibly disconnect you. I will say that if you watch those videos and if you have been around for live streams, pretty much 90% of the time that we were disconnected, we were about to win the game. That's a little suspicious when you play a lot of games, and especially I noticed in the KC Cup, which was broken for a lot of other reasons I'll get to in a second here. The KC Cup had way more disconnects, which would make sense because it was like sort of the world qualifier tournament, so a lot of people would really want to disconnect their opponents. I think that Konami Konami should crack down on cheating a lot more than they do. Very clearly, many of the people that I played against were cheating, and even though you can report them, even if they get banned later on, like, I still take the loss. It still ruins my streak, and several times on the last sort of win to get King of Games, I actually got disconnected. I think the one of my saltier experiences was getting disconnected in my third season of playing, which was the last season that I've played, and getting disconnected against like a deck where I had like four cards on board in a full hand, and my opponent just had one monster, and then I randomly quote unquote disconnect. Extremely frustrating, and I mentioned this in those other videos, but I've played on Wi-Fi connections, I've played on my phone's connection, just a variety of different connections. It's not just like my Wi-Fi doesn't work, it's just a lot of other means that I've went to actually play Duel Links. No matter where I am, it seems like I'm getting disconnected if I'm in a winning position against specific players, and that's just not good from a competitive standpoint. I mentioned the KC Cup was fundamentally broken, and it absolutely was. Like, the whole system of forcing someone to play for 72 hours and get the most wins is ridiculous. I mean, it basically encourages people to group up with their friends, and like one person plays like 36 hours, and then a whole bunch of other people each play like 6-hour shifts, and then they end with the original person. I don't even know how often that happened on ladder. I would imagine a lot, though. The guy that got first, who it seemed like just one person playing, I think he actually plays a TCG as well, which is kind of cool. That guy said he played like 38 hours straight. The fact that Konami asks that of players is just insane. Like, very clearly they have no sort of care or concern about their players' well-being. I think the system that a lot of people have suggested, and that I am going to get on board with, because I think it's a great system, is that it should cap the number of games you play per day, whether that's 50, whether that's 100. I don't think any more than that really makes any sense. Like 50 or 100 games, and then it rewards the player with the highest win-loss ratio. I think this is like clearly like the best way to do this. I'm not sure why it's not. It just seems like, once again, just so poorly designed, and just not designed with the players in mind. Congrats to the person that's going to Worlds. However, and I feel so bad for like the thousands of other people that competed all weekend and wasted like 3 days of their life playing Duel Links and then didn't get anything for it. I mean, yeah, they give you some in-game rewards, but honestly, if you like look at the reward tiers, like the rewards for like getting in the top 5,000 aren't that different from just making it to stage 2, which I found very curious. And if I was someone that would, I mean, I was planning on playing stage 2 like all weekend, and I'm really glad I didn't. There's no way that I would have gotten first, but that's not really the point. The point is that all the people that spent all weekend playing didn't really get anything, and I don't really understand that. It's kind of disappointing. I'm not sure. I mean, I think the system is pretty easily fixable. Just make it so you can only play a certain number of games, and a lot of people have suggested that, so Konami probably is aware. That's a pretty popular suggestion. This may change in the coming months with the introduction of synchros, but oftentimes I found that it feels like there's nothing you can do against certain strategies. It's not that cards like Amazoness Princess and Beat Blazeman for Hire are particularly powerful cards. Obviously, they're not doing anything in the TCG, but they just don't feel that powerful in a vacuum. However, in a lot of the Duel Links matchups, when your opponent goes first and they open those cards, there's just nothing you can do. And part of the issue is that there is no games 2 and 3 to sort of come back. Part of the issue is there's no real hand traps. I think I've mentioned this before, but I think just adding Effect Veiler would fix so many of the issues in Duel Links. I think it would make going second so much easier. It would stop Princess, it would stop for Hire cards, it'd stop the Vampire cards, it would stop Spellbook of what is Blue Boy even called? Spellbook of Prophecy? I can't remember what that card's actual name is. I think just adding Effect Veiler, maybe not a whole bunch of hand traps, I know people don't like them, but I think adding Effect Veiler would fix so many of these issues. Amazoness Princess should not be as good as it is, and yet it's one of the most frustrating cards to play against. And also, I don't have confirmation for this, but I've mentioned this before, it feels like with 3 copies of Amazoness Princess, my opponent opened Princess more than I opened Secrets or Blue Boy. Like, I don't know if you guys were watching some of our live streams, but we were on like a 7 streak of playing against Amazoness where they opened Princess in the opening hand. They only have a 50% chance of opening that card. It feels more like 80 or 90%, and I think a lot of people have said in the comment section, this seems to be unconfirmed, but people have suggested that there's like an issue where Konami makes it so you open ultra rares more than you open other rarities. I have no confirmation on that, but a lot of people seem to say that. And also from my personal experience, I would say that that sounds correct. It seems like those ultra rare cards, your opponent always opens them, but especially in the case of Amazoness Princess. I will say, I mean, in general, the actual metagame, like, it's not that bad. I'd like to see it move more in the direction of decks like Vampires. Vampires ended up being tier 1, even though I thought they weren't going to be that good. And I like Vampires a lot. They're skill intensive. You can build them in a variety of different ways. Like, multiple builds of Vampires are topping, well, I guess they're topping the Duel Links meta tournaments, but like they're doing well on ladder. There's a ton of different tech options you can play in Vampires. They also make great use of Cyber Style in skill intensive ways. I'd like to see more decks like Vampires that really reward good deck building and good playing. I feel like Vampires, more so than like Fur Hire and Destiny Hero, where they just OTK you without any like 2 cards in their deck, Vampires really seem to reward good players, which I think is cool. I'd like to see more decks like that. It's kind of like a positive thing, sort of fit into these negative comments. But I think that Vampires in general are what Konami should try to add to Duel Links. Decks that have a lot of options, that give a lot of creativity to the players, and that are actually tier 1 status. I wasn't sure if I should put this last comment in this section or the next section, but I think the Forbidden and Limitless in Duel Links is a cool idea, and I think it worked when the game was sort of just coming out with that idea. Basically, if you don't know, if you're a TCG player, any card that's limited, you can only have a total of 1 copy of all the limited cards in your deck, and same thing goes for semi-limited. If there's like 2 cards that are semi-limited, you can't have like 2 of both of them. You can only have like 2 of one of them or 1 of both of them. And that makes it for some interesting deck building decisions, and I think it's a neat idea, but it definitely has some issues, and I think the biggest issue isn't the system itself, it's that Konami won't hit pack super rares and ultra rares, and I get it. Like, I understand why they don't do that. I understand that they want people to feel like their investments matter. However, what ends up happening is they hit like all the rares in a deck to make the deck like unplayable, where in reality, they could have just like semi-limited one of the super rares or ultra rares and the deck would have been playable but not tier 1 status. I think people in the TCG often talk about that they like when Konami hits the consistency and the power level of the deck, but the deck is still playable. Well, in Duel Links, pretty much every time there's been like a tier 1 or tier 0 deck, the deck just gets hit into oblivion, which, while yeah, your investment is secure as far as the super rares and ultra rares go, even though they hit just rares, you still like can't play the deck competitively. So I'd like to see them sort of revise the system. I think the players would complain less than Konami thinks they will. The reason I say this is that all the time, I mean, imagine in the TCG, this would be the equivalent if Konami never hit main set secret rares. I mean, some people might be saying, well, yeah, that's good, but is it really good? I mean, that means we're in a world where Rescue Rabbit and Tour Guide never get hit. That's a world where all sorts of cards that are extremely powerful, cards like Evenly Matches, have no chance of making it on the ban list. Cards like Firewall, I mean, Firewall obviously is not banned, but even Firewall, with the Duel Links sort of setup, it wouldn't even be limited. They wouldn't be allowed to. I think they've gone off of this for 1 card. I don't know, as before I was playing, but in general, if a card is a super rare or ultra rare in a pack, Konami is just not going to touch it. I think this is a horrible idea, and also will be like an issue like going forward. It just seems like a bad idea in terms of longevity, mainly because the super rares and ultra rares are often the better cards in the pack, therefore you can't hit any of the better cards. I think this creates a huge issue with cards like Treacherous Trap Hole and Hey Trunade. Those cards absolutely should be on the ban list. They're like, those are some of the most degenerate cards in the entire game, and I think likely those 2 cards in particular will be the cards that Konami is first willing to sort of go off of their previous idea about the Forbidden and Limitless. It seems like those cards just have so many complaints surrounding them. They're super bad to play against. There's almost no counters for them. I mean, just to put it in perspective for people that don't play Duel Links, in Duel Links, Treacherous Trap Hole is so overpowered that even in 20 card decks, people are playing 2 or 3 copies of the card just to see it in their opening hand. And they're even doing that in decks with other trap cards. It is just insane how powerful Treacherous Trap Hole is, but it's a super rare, so with Konami's current system, they actually can't touch it on the Forbidden Limitless, which creates a huge issue, and I think that they can't stick to that much longer. They're going to have to hit Treacherous Trap Hole at some point. that brings us to our last section, which is also the shortest section. I know this video has been super long. Thank you so much to people that have stuck around. But the last section I want to talk about is that obtaining cards is a challenge. And I mentioned that it's a challenge at all levels. So first off, full disclosure, I am a whale for this game. I spent a lot of money, more money than the average consumer. And I would say that when you buy packs from a mini box, it's mostly fine. Buying spellbooks wasn't too difficult. It cost me about $150 to build it from scratch. I didn't think that was that crazy. I got a lot of other cards from that set, so I didn't think that was that unreasonable. Buying cards from mini boxes isn't that horrible. However, buying cards and building decks from regular boxes, especially when you need ultra rares and especially when you need multiple ultra rares, it is insane. Like, oh my god, it is so expensive. I think the easiest fix, from the perspective of someone that's willing to spend money on a game, is just make those sales just always around. If you don't know what I'm talking about, like the normal sales you get some extra gems, and that's just sort of always in the game. When you buy packs, you get free gems. However, there's these sales like every once in a while. It seems like once or twice a month, where you get, like, when you buy a couple packs, you get a free SR, and then when you buy like a couple more packs, you get another free SR, and then if you buy enough packs, you get like a free SR and a free ultra rare. And I think that's really cool, and I think they should just always have that. I mean, even when you have those sales, you're still spending an awful lot of money to get the decks you want, but I think it actually gives people a lot more control. And also, it doesn't make any sense to me, but when you go through the whole tier of sales, they just go away. Like, it doesn't loop back to the first one. I have no idea why that is. If you've gone through all the sales, you've already spent over $100 on this game, I think Konami should be at least a little less greedy and just let you start the sale cycle over again. Because, like, yeah, that was like the most disappointing thing for me when I bought that main box, is after I went through all the sales, I was like, okay, now I have to buy the regular packs, and there's so many issues with just buying the regular packs because it's so hard to pull SRs and URs and stuff. So I think that just making those sales always around and always looping to reward the players that are actually willing to spend hundreds of dollars on this game, maybe make it a little cheaper for them. Obviously, they don't care too much for spending that money, but I think it's the difference between spending like $200 on a box and spending like $300 or $400 on a box. But I think it gives a lot more sort of assurance to the players that Konami isn't just screwing them over at every opportunity. Because I feel like from the free-to-play perspective, people do feel like Konami is sort of like screwing them over sometimes, but I think if you're willing to spend the money on the game, they really like you, they want to keep you around, so just reward those players by giving them some more sales. I think that makes absolutely just a ton of sense. Also, I should mention, like, I don't have any experience with free-to-play in this game, and I will say that, like, from my comment section and from, like, the live stream chat, I don't think there is a consensus on whether or not free-to-play is possible. Just from my own comment section, it seems like there's a ton of people that say it's really possible, and people are complaining about the game being expensive when they shouldn't be. On the other hand, there's a ton of people saying that they play free-to-play, and it's like impossible to like get the decks that they want to play. From my experience, I would say that it seems like if you start a new account every 3 months, you can usually build a deck from the mini box that just comes out. That seems like a terrible system. I'm not sure how people are like agreeing that like, oh, it's a good system to have to reset your account and start something new every time you want to play a new deck. That doesn't seem really free to play to me. If I think of a game like Hearthstone, once again, you don't have to just create a new account every time a new pack comes out. You can just get rid of your old cards to get the new cards, so you don't have to buy so many packs. Speaking of getting rid of older cards in Hearthstone to get newer cards, the card trader in Duel Links is as big of a joke as card trader is in the TCG as a physical card. If you think the card trader is an acceptable means to get cards, then you don't know what you're missing. Konami is completely shafting every single player, from the casual players all the way up into the competitive players, from people that spend no money up to the people that spend a lot of money. The card trader is a joke, and I can't believe anyone can defend how bad the card card traders. Like, I just don't get how people are just like, oh, the card trader is pretty good. Like, you can build a row mages, you can get that grass looks greener. While there are occasionally good cards at the card trader, gold is basically completely useless. If you watch anyone open up their Duel Links account, they all have like 1,000,000 gold, and that's not even like a hyperbole. Like, I literally have almost 1,000,000 gold because there's nothing to spend it on. I think I spent some gold on one copy of that grass looks greener. Other than that, though, if you don't want to play a row mages, your gold is pretty much useless, and I think that's crazy. Just in case you haven't heard of the dusting system in Hearthstone, basically you can get rid of any one card for about 1/4 or 1/8 of its value. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but keep in mind that means when you have extra copies of a card, you can get rid of 8 extra copies of just various cards you have to get a same card that you don't have in that same rarity, and that's really cool because it means you actually can use your extra cards. Now, in the case of Duel Links, the extra cards, all they're good for is getting cards from the card trader, and because the card trader doesn't have like any good cards from it, like it has some cards but not like any of the relevant ones, and definitely none of them from like the newer boxes, it means that you basically, while you can get rid of the extra copies of cards you have, they don't really go for anything. Like, just keep that in mind. Like, the people that haven't gotten it through their head yet, like how good Hearthstone's dusting system is, and people still complain about that, like the Hearthstone players, you can dust cards from a year ago in Hearthstone that aren't even legal in standard format to get new cards completely free of charge. You can get the newest, the rarest cards from the brand new set that just came out with no issues as long as you're willing to get rid of older cards. I don't know why Duel Links doesn't have, well, in this case, I actually do know why Duel Links doesn't have the systems, because they want you to buy. Just keep buying packs. Just don't worry about all the extra cards you have that are completely useless. Don't worry about all those extra SRs that you can't do anything with. Just keep buying our product until you pull exactly what you want to pull. So I understand why Konami wants to not include like a good crafting system, a good dusting system. However, I think it's a joke and just a slap in the face of all players of Duel Links. In conclusion of the longest video on my channel, I don't think Duel Links is completely terrible, and I actually enjoyed like the vast majority of my time spent with the game. It was really just those last 2 weeks that I started to hate it. On a casual level, I think it's a great time waster. I think it's cool that it's like on your phone, and I do think it's a cool way to actually get people interested into the game if they wouldn't play the TCG. You know, it's a lot to ask someone to pick up a new physical trading card game. You have to like know where to play, you have to have friends to play it against, but I think in the case of Duel Links, it's really cool that people see like an ad for it on Twitter or on Facebook, they pick up the game, and maybe they do end up buying into the TCG. Competitively, however, it demands like way too much of your time and money from the player with like really like no payoff. I mean, the payoff is like gems and not even that many of them, and the gems just go back into the newer packs, but you can't ever get enough gems to actually build decks from the new packs, so you always have to be spending money or just force yourself to not play with the newest cards. And after spending almost 2 weeks straight playing Duel Links during stage 1 of the KC Cup and playing that third King of Game run, I honestly thought I was starting to hate Yu-Gi-Oh! Luckily, when I took a break from Duel Links and played some real-life TCG Yu-Gi-Oh!, I found my love for the game again. And that isn't an exaggeration. Like, I honestly started equating my hate and frustration with Duel Links for all of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that's not good. This is the most, it's so weird. I wasn't even playing the TCG, and this is the most frustrated I've been with Yu-Gi-Oh! In my entire life. It is just crazy. I do not know if I'll quit Duel Links, at least for the time being. I haven't been playing it. I haven't played it since September 10th, which is obviously a little while ago. I don't plan on playing it until the next month when the next season comes around. I just needed a break from Duel Links. It was too much. It was making me too salty. Never before have like I went to a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament and like gotten so frustrated, because I feel like at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament in the TCG, you have so much control over what happens. You have your side deck, you can deck build whatever you want as long as you're willing to buy the singles that you're trying to play with, and you have all these sort of options. But when I played Duel Links, I felt that so often the game was decided on the coin toss. The game was decided on the matchup, not my skill as a deck builder and not my skill as a player. Anyway, though, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I know I talked about a lot of stuff that probably some people will disagree with. I really tried to be as objective as possible in this video, although obviously you have to realize, and obviously I have to realize, many of these comments are going to be subjective, so don't take anything I say as a fact, just my opinion on Duel Links, although I think a lot of the times these things, a lot of the competitive Duel Links players will actually agree with, such as the rank system being a mess. Anyway, though, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.